should do, okay, to just protect my personal information and my online capabilities. And it's actually pretty straightforward. So it starts with you deciding what you need to protect, whether it's in your business or whether it's in your home. And if you keep all your financial records online in a certain space on your computer, right? Maybe you want to download that to a disk periodically and only keep the last 2 weeks of transactions. Do you see what I'm saying? In other words, do a little bit of triage. And like we were talking earlier about a hospital, you know, maybe a hospital would have all their regular transactions, but all the in-depth personal medical files kept in more of a firewalled area that isn't automatically accessible to the entire intranet environment, and there are ways to do that. So it's basically you do the triage. What do I have in my company or my home or my personal life that is really precious to me, that if it's taken or damaged, remember, they can just destroy the information so that you can't get it, okay? And then how do I need to protect that? And then everything else I don't care about, you know? Because you're never going to completely protect all information, all networks from malware or from disruption or from destruction. So pick what it is you want to protect and protect it. I hate to say this, but this is just basic stuff. Keep up with the patches. I know it sounds boring, but it's kind of like putting your seatbelt on. If you keep up with the software updates and the patches, security patches, the basic approaches, you will prevent 80 to 90% of all attacks. Because 80 to 90% of all attacks are based on known vulnerabilities. And software developers and cybersecurity guys and IT service guys are actually pretty on it. And so they're updating and upgrading things based on those known vulnerabilities, okay? And so then you're really only vulnerable to the high-end hackers. And frankly, most high-end hackers aren't going after your small company or your household, okay? They're going for something that's worth something. So you really do prevent a tremendous amount by just doing what we call basic hygiene, and that everybody can do quite easily. Then it gets to that next level if you're a larger business or you're part of an overall sector or you're part of an overall community, know what's going on in that sector. So that can be through InfraGard or through the ISACs if you're a larger company or entity, or through the InfraGard is your city, your area. They will let you know what's going on in a larger venue, okay? And you can also do things like do the backup plans for your critical infrastructure for your electrical grid. And then, being an career intelligence professional, I just automatically assume that the bad guys have what we call root level access almost anywhere they want to have it. So in other words, root level access means they got the keys to your house, they're in your house, and they're just waiting for you. So unless you're protecting things differently, you should almost assume that. If you're not doing regular hygiene, if you're a major business and you're not staying connected with what's going on in your sector, then just assume that they're already in and that they know everything that's in your system. And if you're okay with that, then you just live with that. So that's the end of the presentation. Let's go to questions.
You promised to talk about Snowden.
I said I'd answer questions about Snowden.
We're putting a microphone over here. If you could come up and speak into the microphone, thank you.
I've always been a little bit befuddled by the mutation of the word cyber since Norbert Wiener first proposed it back in the 50s. And we're really talking about security of digital information.
Yes.
And what it seems to me, so much of this stuff that you're talking about is to try to build the perfect secure system. Isn't it more important, getting back to Norbert Wiener and his concept of cybernetics, not just the data, that detecting, not just trying to design the perfect system, but having continuous detection of what's actually going on to try to catch incipient problems before they become catastrophic problems.
So, again, we did not design the global internet with security in mind. We designed it for the enabling power of it, right? We focused on all the good things, the communication, the free flow of information, the ability to collaborate, now the ability to share video. So the problem is, it was never really designed with either data assurance or infrastructure assurance in mind. Now, there are some computer scientists right now that say, as we start replacing pieces of the global internet, we should do it more with a design and assurance in mind. So that's one theory. And there's work being done in that area. Another theory is, you're never going to protect everything. So create a what's called a green zone versus the red zone is the internet at large. Create a green zone for critical infrastructure and key national security functions that is completely separate from the internet, and use that for those critical functions, so that if everything goes to heck, right, you still have the ability to communicate. You still have, law enforcement would have a net, and some of the power grid would work until you could get things back up. And then the third big approach right now is the data. So screw the infrastructure, it's never going to be secure. Create, and one of the technologies that's been developed recently that they're still trying to operationalize, in other words, make it cost effective, is encrypted digital watermarking, where you're actually creating, taking the data packets and creating a signature on them that is impenetrable unless you have the key, and the key, because it's digitally encrypted and it's actually a watermark on the data, is almost impossible to break. So those are, three of the big things that are being talked about right now.
But I'm trying to suggest a fourth.
Okay.
And that's monitoring the actual activity with algorithms to determine whether there's unusual activity.
Yes.
And
So,
hey, some kid in Kuwait's downloading a lot of stuff.
Right.
Why are we having all that crazy activity in Kuwait?
Yes.
And I'm referring to Bradley Mann.
So that's actually cyber intelligence. So cyber intelligence is having the entire network, global network, with sensors, and some private portions of the network do have sensors. And so when you have those sensors, then you can have situational awareness of what normal activity is going on, what abnormal activity is going on, and then you can say, hey, I need to shut down that portion of the network until I figure out, what's going on there. But to do that, you would have to have the cooperation of the world. Or we could ask NSA to just put sensors everywhere.
Enjoyed your talk. I'm
Thanks.
curious as your perspective on, say, some of the big industries that touch all our lives.
Okay.
Say, banking, the water, and the electrical.
Okay.
I'm kind of curious as your perspective is, How strong are they?
Okay.
Especially I'm a banker, we're spending an awful lot of money in regulatory
It-
environment. I can't imagine.
Okay, I'm not sucking up to you, but financial sector are the best. I mean, no kidding. You guys, I think because it's an immediate impact to your reputation, to your customer set, you got it early on. And so the financial sector as a whole has the best partnerships, the best cooperation. They've worked, I think, well to develop the business case of why they need to invest. Remember, the figuring out the rate of return of investment for cybersecurity is, by the way, if anyone can figure that one out, you will be a billionaire. Because right now it's a nightmare to try to figure out what's a pound, right, of cybersecurity stuff get you. You just know that if you get had, then, umpty frats is at risk. So the financial sector is the best. The electric and water are getting better. I'd like them to move faster. Actually, the ones that I worry about the most are the oil sector, because the oil companies really haven't had the kind of hit that a lot of the other sectors have had. And the bottom line is that if they were had, we're all in trouble, right? We all depend upon oil. And remember, almost everything today, whether it's oil refinery and production, is all software driven. Anything that has software in it and is connected to the internet is vulnerable. Yes, sir.
You've probably heard the phrase, a good offense is a good defense.
Yes, yes.
The U.S. Army has a cyber warfare command.
Right.
What can you tell us about that, if anything?
Oh, I can.
Well, okay, so what
Okay.
is the U.S.
Okay.
doing? Not defensively,
Okay.
but aggressively.
Right. So a couple of problems. The statute, okay? So let's start. Department of Defense established several years ago the U.S. Cyber Command. And then each of the services created cyber components, okay? But the problem is, because the statute hasn't caught up, all they are allowed to do legally is defend .mil networks. So the military networks. They can't even defend the .gov networks. And they definitely are not currently allowed to defend the .com networks. So if you watch the recent cyber exercise that we were talking about earlier in the Washington Post, I got to play the banking sector, and then I got to play the oil sector, and we had Department of Defense, and we had Homeland Security, and we had the Director of National Intelligence, and the bottom line is they couldn't do much to help me. I was kind of on my own. I mean, there are things that I can call them in on, like actually the best partner you have in industry, commercially, is the FBI. Because if things are going on, right, that are criminal or nefarious in any way, and actually the FBI has a pretty darn good cybersecurity operational arm, they can be brought in. They have a great away forensics team, and they can assess, right, what damage has been done, and then they can help you to put in place that damage control. But you notice what I'm saying? It's after the fact. The only way that companies can protect themselves before the fact are the kinds of things that I'm talking about. So now, statute could catch up, and they could allow the Department of Defense, who has a very sophisticated capability, to start providing broader protections, but then we start getting into the whole thing of how far do you want government really coming? It's complicated. Yes, ma'am.
I am of the opinion that Snowden really did us a favor. He, for example, did not release the details of your conversation with Putin, for example. He just told us what many of us suspected was happening is really going on. And if you know what the problem is, isn't it a lot easier to deal with it? Doesn't it make us all a lot smarter?
So I do think that the U.S. government made one big mistake. That when the Patriot Act was passed, okay, and remember that was at a point in time when technology was at a certain point in time, we didn't have an open discussion as technology evolved and what our expectation of privacy today should be vis-a-vis the new technology. So our laws that exist today of expectation and privacy, I think, are 30 years old, something like that, maybe longer. I mean, think about it, and this is the analogy I give. In my grandparents' time, and you had the local operator and the switchboard, did you have any expectation of privacy? Oh, Julie, your granddaughter's calling you again. I think she called you last week, didn't she? You know? Now, as we went to, not having switches, then we had the expectation of when we were on the phone and we were having conversations, those were private. And if there was probable cause through law enforcement that they needed to pull your phone records, right? They could go to Ma Bell and they could get your phone records, okay? The problem is where we are right now is we developed a lot of fantastic analytic capabilities of externals of internet communications based on the last 12 years of war, right? Because we're tracking bad guys who were using cell phones in Afghanistan, in Iraq, and so what you wanted to know was hey, this is the communication of the bad guys, now who are they talking to? And so we developed